My favorite childhood memory turned out to be based on a cruel lie. I was about 5 years old when my mom and my uncle took me to SeaWorld. Just me, not my sisters, only me. For the first time in my life, I got to have the only child experience, and I felt so special. Because it was just me, I got to eat the food that they sold at the park instead of a smushed up bologna sandwich from my mother's purse like usual. I even got to take home a giant inflatable whale toy from the gift shop, and I slept with it every single night until it had more holes than we had patches. Not only that, but since I went with my mom and my uncle, the casual observer would think that I belonged to a nuclear family. Even though I was very young, I was already aware of the social stigma that came from coming from a single parent household. The day was so perfect that I didn't know, nor did I even care where my sisters had been the whole time. Not long after we returned back home, my father's cousin pulled up and dropped my sisters off. They had spent the day on a shopping spree. They had matching knockoff Louis Vuitton purses, lip glosses, candies, and all sorts of other little goodies. I was slightly jealous because I wanted a new purse too, but I was mostly just confused as to why we had different itineraries that day. But I couldn't quite articulate my feelings, and I definitely couldn't demand answers from my mom. Almost 20 years later, a new coworker would answer that question for me. I had just started a new job at a janky car dealership when I was in undergrad. One of my new coworkers was a middle-aged British Nigerian guy. I noticed him noticing my long last name, and he gave me a look that I was very familiar with. It was the squinty-eyed look of my tea being clocked in real time. Then I commenced to perform the exact same script that I have to perform every single time I meet a Nigerian man. Where is your last name from? Nigeria. What tribe? Yoruba. What part of Nigeria? Lagos. Why don't you look Nigerian? I don't know. Is your mother white?
Your mom is white.
My mother is not white.
Is your
Why
mom?
do people keep saying my mother is white?
I thought that conversation would be the end of it. That's where my script usually ends. But he decided to do a little rogue investigative journalism and find out if he had any mutuals with my father. About a week or so later, he comes back to work and tells me that he's actually friends with my father's cousin, the very same cousin who dropped my sisters off that night after SeaWorld. He then proceeds to tell me that that cousin told him that I'm not actually my father's biological child and that only my sisters are my father's real children. Suddenly, a lifetime of questions had an answer. Suddenly, that night after SeaWorld made perfect sense. Suddenly, the annual phone call I would receive from my father throughout my entire childhood, where he would spend the majority of the time speaking to me, asking me why I look the way I look, suddenly made sense. I don't know if it was because I was just a child or if it was my neurodivergence that made me completely oblivious to what he was implying when he would repeatedly question my appearance. I just thought that he didn't have anything else to talk to me about because he didn't really know me, because he chose not to know me. I had no idea that he and Ernest denied paternity. It is still difficult to believe that that is why I got to go to SeaWorld and live my dream of being an only child in a nuclear family. My mom probably didn't want to deny my sisters an opportunity to spend time with our father's side of the family. She probably also didn't want to have to explain to me why my father's cousin didn't want to take me along. So she took me to SeaWorld as a distraction. Or as a consolation prize. Or maybe being 2 kids down is the only time she could afford to go see Shamu. Either way, I can't imagine the predicament this must have put my mother in. It's unfair that she was even put in this situation when it was based completely on their ignorance of how biology works.